Hello, I'm Jessica Dickens, and I'm going to talk to you about an annotated bibliography I did on the testing on animals for cosmetic purposes. The first source that I used was an article titled European Union Considers Banning Animal Testing for Cosmetics, written by Dr. Moshe Shalev, who is currently a professor of comparative medicine at Columbia University. Dr. Shalev talks about the purpose for the European Union's ban being to protect and improve the welfare of the animals that are being used for the testing. He also talks about the four main objectives that the European Union has. And the first one is to prohibit testing on animals for cosmetic purposes entirely. The second is to prohibit any of those companies from using any ingredients that have been tested on animals. The third is to align the provisions of the directive with the World Trade Organization. And the fourth is to improve consumer information in relation to cosmetic products. The second article that I used is written by animal activist Allison Abbott, titled Animal Testing, More Than a Cosmetic Change. Abbott talks about the European Union and the timeline that they have, along with the REACH directive, requesting that all the chemicals that are used be registered. Many animal rights groups feared that this would mean that more animals would be tested on in order to meet these timeline requirements. Abbott states that many of these tests were resulted from a crisis. So, for instance, if a woman used mascara that caused her to lose her eyesight, at that time the cosmetic company would perform toxicity tests to find the cause of that, and they would try to prevent that in the future. She also states that some methods have already been introduced and that toxicology has decreased slightly, but still about 1 million animals are used yearly. For example, the LD50 test, which is the process of feeding chemicals through a tube to animals to determine the lethal dose, still accounts for 1/3 of the animal tests in the world. Abbott appeals to our emotions by giving us the number of animals that are involved in these tests. The third article that I used was titled Alternative Methods to Safety Studies in Experimental Animals, written by Helmut Green. Green talks about, like Abbott, the deadlines that were set in place by the European Union and states that the second date is to completely phase out the animals, but it's unrealistic. And also states that the first is to implement the chemical registration, and it is also unrealistic. He states, though, that in order to phase out animals completely, you need to have a wide range of variability in predicting the toxic effects, and the computer systems that you would need wouldn't allow for that. He says that there's no other alternative systems that could detect the chemical effects as well as in the vitro tests. The fourth source that I used is an article titled International Regulators Back Viability of Non-Animal Skin Toxicity Testing, written by Maria Hegstad. She discussed the meeting that scientists from the EPA, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, Food and Drug Administration, and National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences attended, along with regulators from various countries. And they discussed the steps that they would need to implement to bring those alternatives to animal testing to use. The regulators would first start by summarizing all of the testing requirements by all of the different countries, and then they would set the standards to replace their current practices. They've actually already begun the chemical testing, and that the results for the in vitro would be compared to the results of the human tests developed in the lab. Hegstad quotes Nicole Kleinstrauer, the deputy director of NEIHS, who stated, "We really achieved consensus that these non-animal testing strategies are ready to replace animal tests in the chemical sphere where they've been tested." The fifth source that I used is an article written by PR Newswire titled Alamar Biosciences Produces First Non-Toxic In Vitro Indicator Dye. expected to significantly reduce toxicity testing on animals. Alamar Blue is the first test of its kind, and it could revolutionize the industry. It provides an easy, cost-effective, and harmless form of toxicity testing. The company states that the current toxicity tests are extremely toxic to animals, and they require many more steps than their product, Alamar Blue, requires. And because this is such an easy process and does require fewer steps, they state that it would actually save the company's labor costs in order to facilitate their test over the current toxicity tests that are being used. The fifth source that I chose is again written by Allison Abbott, and it's titled The Lowdown on Animal Testing for Cosmetics. Abbott discusses the effects that the European ban would have on Europe as a whole. Europe is a worldwide leader in cosmetics, according to Abbott, and they actually make up about half of the entire world's market. So it would be very difficult to put these type of restrictions on such a profitable industry without already having all of these alternatives set in place. So they can't just ban animal testing with no solution. She states that they were given the March deadline and only 4 out of the 7 tests were approved, and no other countries have yet placed a ban like the European Union has. That concludes my annotated bibliography presentation. Thank you.